It was one of those nights where everything felt heavy. My heart was shattered, the pain of recent heartbreak still fresh. The world around me felt bleak, as if the color had drained from everything, and I was left in a gray fog of sadness. My aunt had noticed my melancholy and, as always, decided to intervene in her unique way. She was the wild card in the family, fun, spontaneous, and a little reckless, especially after a drink or two. But she had a heart of gold, always looking out for me, and somehow she knew exactly when I needed her the most. That evening, she showed up at my door with her friend Leah. Leah was just like her, vivacious, carefree, with an infectious laugh that could make even the most serious person crack a smile. They were already tipsy, giggling like schoolgirls as they barged into my apartment, bottles of wine in hand. "Come on, kid," my aunt said, her words slightly slurred but full of determination. "We're not letting you wallow in this any longer." I tried to protest, but before I could get a word out, they had pushed me onto the couch, Leah pouring me a glass of wine while my aunt rifled through my kitchen, searching for snacks. I could tell this was their way of helping, and even though I wasn't in the mood for company, I didn't have the energy to resist. So I let them take over, hoping that maybe their antics would distract me from the ache in my chest. The night started off light, them sharing stories, telling jokes, and trying to make me laugh. But as the wine flowed and the hours passed, the conversation grew deeper, more intimate. My aunt, always the open book, started talking about her own past heartaches, moments I had never known about. She spoke with such raw emotion, and I realized that despite her carefree exterior, she had experienced her own share of pain. Leah chimed in too, sharing stories of her failed relationships, her near misses with love. It was oddly comforting, hearing these two women, both older and wiser, talk about their own vulnerabilities. They had lived through their heartbreaks and come out on the other side, still standing, still laughing, still full of life. And somehow, that gave me a little bit of hope. Maybe I could survive this too. At some point, the wine must have hit me harder than I realized, because the room felt warmer, the edges of my sadness blurring. My aunt, noticing the shift in my mood, moved closer to me on the couch, her hand resting on my shoulder. "You know," she said softly, her voice a little more serious now, "heartbreak doesn't define you. You're more than this pain. You deserve happiness, love, all of it." I looked at her, surprised by the tenderness in her tone. Leah, sitting across from us, nodded in agreement. There was something different about the way they were looking at me now, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just sympathy or concern. There was a spark of something else, something that made my pulse quicken. Before I could process it, my aunt leaned in closer, her lips brushing my cheek. It was a soft, lingering kiss. I froze, unsure of what to do, my heart racing. Leah watched, her eyes locked on mine, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Relax," my aunt whispered, her breath warm against my skin. "You deserve to feel good." I didn't know what to say, my mind spinning with confusion and desire. It was wrong, wasn't it? But the way they were both looking at me, the way their touches lingered, made it hard to think clearly. My body responded before my mind could catch up, leaning into the warmth of my aunt's embrace. Leah stood up, crossing the room to join us on the couch. She sat beside me, her fingers lightly tracing the curve of my jaw, her touch gentle but deliberate. "You're too hard on yourself," she murmured, her lips inches from mine. "Let us take care of you tonight." I didn't resist as Leah's lips met mine in a soft, slow kiss. It was sweet, almost hesitant, as if she was giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. But I didn't. I couldn't. The weight of my heartbreak seemed to lift, replaced by the warmth of their touch, their closeness. My aunt's hands moved to my shoulders, massaging gently, her breath hot against my neck. "You've been through enough," she whispered, her voice low and soothing. And I did. I let go of the pain, the sadness, the confusion. In that moment, all that mattered was the way they were both making me feel. Wanted, cared for, loved in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Their touches were soft but insistent, their kisses slow and lingering, and I found myself lost in the sensation, in the moment. Time seemed to blur as the night went on, the three of us tangled together on the couch. Don't miss out on the journey to 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button now and be part of something big before everyone else. It was slow, gentle, almost dreamlike. as if they were trying to erase every ounce of hurt with each touch, each kiss. They were both so attentive, so careful, as if they knew exactly what I needed without me having to say a word. My aunt's fingers trailed down my arm, sending shivers through my body, while Leah's lips pressed against my neck, her kisses soft but deliberate. The room was filled with the quiet sounds of our breathing, the rustle of fabric as we moved against each other, and the faint hum of the city outside. Everything else faded away, the heartbreak, the sadness, the confusion. In that moment, there was only the warmth of their bodies, the softness of their touch, and the feeling of being completely, utterly cared for. At some point, I must have drifted off to sleep, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the soft light of dawn filtering through the windows. My aunt and Leah were still there, curled up on either side of me, their arms draped over me in a protective embrace. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of heartbreak pressing down on me. Instead, I felt lighter, not completely healed, but better, as if the night had helped me take the first step toward moving on. As I lay there, feeling the warmth of their bodies next to mine, my mind drifted back to the events of the night before. The weight of my emotions hadn't completely disappeared, but it had lessened, replaced by something softer, something more manageable. I still felt a tinge of confusion, but there was also an unexpected sense of comfort. Maybe it was the closeness, the way they had both been there for me when I needed it most. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so alone. My aunt stirred next to me, her arm tightening around my waist as she slowly woke up. She mumbled something incoherent under her breath, then opened her eyes and gave me a sleepy smile. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were still half closed, but there was something about the way she looked at me that felt reassuring, like everything that had happened was okay, like it was exactly what I needed. "Morning," she whispered, her voice soft and raspy from sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. She stretched her body, brushing against mine as she sat up, and for a moment, the awkwardness of the situation threatened to creep in. But before I could let my mind spiral, Leah stirred on the other side of me, her arm draped across my chest. She blinked her eyes open, a lazy smile spreading across her lips when she saw us. "Looks like someone needed a good night's rest," Leah said, her voice teasing but kind. She shifted closer, resting her head on my shoulder, her hand still lightly tracing patterns on my arm. I couldn't help but smile. Despite the strange circumstances, it felt safe. There was no judgment, no awkwardness, just the gentle understanding that last night had been about comfort, about healing, and maybe, just maybe, about something deeper. "Thank you," I said softly, looking between the two of them. My voice wavered, the weight of my gratitude heavy in the air. "For last night, everything." My aunt's smile grew, and she reached out to ruffle my hair, the gesture playful, but filled with affection. "Hey, that's what family's for," she said. "We've all been through it. You're not alone in this, okay? You're never alone." Leah nodded in agreement, her hand still resting gently on my arm. "Heartbreak sucks," she said, her tone more serious now, "but it doesn't define you, and it doesn't last forever. You'll find your way through this." Their words were simple, but they carried a weight that I hadn't realized I needed to hear. For so long, I had been trapped in my own head, convinced that the pain of losing someone I loved would never go away. But now, with the warmth of their presence surrounding me, I felt the glimmer of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, the soft light of the morning filtering through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the room. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that had been swirling inside me for weeks. And in that peace, I found the strength to take a deep breath, to let go of some of the hurt that had been weighing me down. Eventually, my aunt stretched and got up from the couch, her movements slow and relaxed. She padded over to the kitchen, mumbling something about coffee, while Leah stayed by my side, her head resting comfortably on my shoulder. "Are you feeling any better?" Leah asked quietly, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I nodded, my heart feeling lighter than it had in days. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I think I am." Leah smiled, her fingers gently tracing patterns on my arm. "Good, you deserve to feel good." Her words lingered in the air, and for a moment, I felt a connection between us that went beyond just last night. There was something unspoken, something deeper that I couldn't quite put into words, but I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the pressure to analyze every feeling, every emotion. I just let it be. As the morning wore on, the three of us settled into an easy rhythm. My aunt brewed coffee, and we sat around the small kitchen table, sipping our cups in comfortable silence. The remnants of the night before still hung in the air, but it didn't feel heavy or awkward. It just was, and that was okay. Eventually, Leah stood up and stretched, her arms reaching above her head. "I should probably get going," she said, though her tone was reluctant, as if she wasn't quite ready to leave the quiet bubble we had created. "But if you ever need someone to talk to or just hang out with, you know where to find me." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest at her offer. "Thank you, Leah," I said sincerely. "I really appreciate that." She leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead before gathering her things and heading for the door. My aunt and I walked her out, and after a few more hugs and goodbyes, we were left alone in the quiet of my apartment. I turned to my aunt, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside me. "I don't know what I would have done without you," I admitted, my voice thick with gratitude. She shrugged, but there was a softness in her eyes. "That's what I'm here for, kid, to help you through the tough times." She paused, then added with a smile, "And maybe to get a little tipsy and make a fool of myself in the process." I laughed, the sound surprising me with how light it felt. "Well, it worked," I said. "I feel better, lighter." My aunt smiled, her expression warm and proud. "Good, that's all that matters." We stood there for a moment, the quiet settling around us like a blanket, and in that stillness I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was starting to heal. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would still be full of ups and downs, but for the first time since my heartbreak, I felt like I wasn't facing it alone. As my aunt pulled me into one last hug before heading out the door, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would be okay. Because I had people who cared about me, who would be there to pick me up when I stumbled, and who would remind me over and over again that I was stronger than I thought. And with that, I closed the door behind her, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't the end of my heartbreak, but it was a new beginning, and for now, that was enough. As I stood there, leaning against the closed door, the quiet of the apartment felt different, not lonely, but peaceful. The kind of quiet that allows you to breathe deeply, to let go of the tension that had been building inside for so long. The ache of my heartbreak hadn't disappeared, but the sharp edges had softened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could move forward. I walked over to the couch, the spot where the night before had unfolded, memories of my aunt and Leah's comforting presence flooding back to me. Their touch, their closeness. It had been exactly what I needed. But now, with the morning light pouring in, I felt something else stir inside me, something more than just gratitude or relief. It was a warmth that spread through my chest, longing that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. Sat down, running my fingers over the fabric of the couch, replaying the moments of the night before in my mind. The soft kisses, the way their hands had moved over me with such care, the way they made me feel like I was worth something, like I deserved to be held and loved. Even in the midst of my heartbreak, a soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts, and for a moment I wondered if I had imagined it. But then it came again, this time a little louder, more insistent. I had got up, my heart quickening for reasons I couldn't explain, and when I opened the door, there she was, Leah, standing in the hallway, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that took me by surprise. Her hand rested on the doorframe, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. It was like the air between us was charged, thick with everything that had been left unspoken the night before. "I couldn't leave without seeing you again," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat at her words, and I stepped back to let her in. She walked inside slowly, her eyes never leaving mine, and the tension between us was palpable, electric. I closed the door behind her, suddenly feeling the weight of the space between us, as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. Leah moved closer, her steps slow and deliberate, until she was standing right in front of me. Her hand reached up, her fingers brushing lightly against my cheek, and I shivered at the softness of her touch. "I know last night was unexpected," she began, her voice low and filled with something I couldn't quite place, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. My mind was racing, but all I could focus on was the way her touch lingered on my skin, the way her eyes held mine with such intensity. Before I could find the words, she closed the distance between us, her lips capturing mine in a soft, tentative kiss. It was slow, gentle, but full of longing, and I felt myself melting into her, my hands instinctively reaching for her waist, pulling her closer. Her kiss deepened, her hands sliding up to cup my face, and I lost myself in the warmth of her lips, the sweetness of her breath against mine. It felt like time stopped in that moment, like the world around us faded away, and there was nothing left but the two of us, tangled in each other's embrace. Her lips moved against mine with a tenderness that made my heart ache, and I realized just how much I had been craving this. The closeness, the intimacy, the feeling of being wanted. When she finally pulled back, we were both breathing heavily, the space between us charged with something electric, something undeniable. Her eyes searched mine, as if she was looking for reassurance, for permission to continue. "I'm sorry if this is too much," she whispered, her breath warm against my lips. "But I couldn't leave without knowing if you felt the same." I didn't hesitate this time. My hands tightened on her waist, pulling her even closer until there was no space left between us. "I do," I murmured against her lips before capturing her in another kiss, this one deeper, more urgent. Leah's hands moved to my hair, tangling in the strands as she kissed me back with a hunger that matched my own. It was as if the dam had broken, and all the feelings we had been holding back came rushing to the surface, pouring out in every kiss, every touch. I backed up, pulling her with me, until we were once again standing by the couch where everything had started. She pushed me gently down onto the cushions, her lips never leaving mine as she followed me, straddling my lap and wrapping her arms around my neck. The feeling of her body pressed against mine sent a surge of heat through me, and I couldn't help but let out a soft moan against her mouth. Her kisses were intoxicating, each one deeper and more passionate than the last. My hands roamed her back, tracing the curve of her spine as I pulled her closer, needing to feel her, to lose myself in the warmth of her body. She broke the kiss only to trail her lips down my neck, her breath hot against my skin, and I tilted my head back, giving her more access as she pressed soft, lingering kisses along my throat. "You're beautiful," she murmured against my skin, her voice sending shivers down my spine. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her words made my heart race, and I tangled my fingers in her hair, guiding her back to my lips for another deep, searing kiss. It was as if we were both caught up in the intensity of the moment, unable to stop, unable to get enough of each other. I could feel the heat between us building, the air thick with desire, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to fully embrace the moment. There was no overthinking, no second guessing, just the feeling of Leah's lips on mine, her body against mine, and the overwhelming sense of rightness that came with it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about the past, about the heartbreak or the pain. I wasn't worried about what the future would hold or how things would unfold between us. All I cared about was the way she made me feel in that moment, alive, cherished, and wanted. And for now, that was more than enough.